Hey guys, so you ready for today's January 30th, 2024, almost 5 a.m. Central Time, 2024 SCOTUS cases, Supreme Court, United States. Brought up this article James sent me. It doesn't have any opinion in it, just has facts about stuff, so that's why I'm going over it. January 6 rioters, abortion, gun rights, a look ahead at landmark cases SCOTUS will hear in 2024. So it talks about social media. Forgive me for anything I mispronounce regarding names or otherwise. Moody, Florida AG versus NetChoice LLC, NetChoice LLC versus Moody, NetChoice LLC versus Paxton. It says, at issue whether social media platforms' handling of user content is protected by the First Amendment. These are pretty interesting cases. The case, separate laws in Florida and Texas would require companies like X and Facebook to host third-party communications and would prevent those businesses from blocking or removing users' posts based on political viewpoints. The argument that aims to address what some lawmakers call censoring of conservative messages and banning politicians like former President Trump for violating policies over offensive or problematic content. A federal appeals court had ruled for the tech industry in Florida case, saying it, as private entities, those companies were engaged in constitutionally protected expressive activity when they moderate and curate the content that they disseminate on their platforms. End quote. Impact. Trump and a coalition of 16 states are among those filing separate amicus briefs supporting Florida. The Biden administration has opposed the state laws. Executive power. Looper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. This is a very interesting case and will dramatically affect the ABC agencies from all their overreach and anything that they changed. Like during the Obama administration, the IRS pushed back a lot of Obamacare fees and stuff to later years. It would stop them from doing that type of stuff. It would stop the ATF from trying to reinterpret a lot of things, which also has to do with the case that they're going to see here. So here's the deal. Potential far-reaching appeal over, and by the way, Thomas and Gorsuch, Thomas especially for years has talked about the overreach of federal agencies. He will absolutely vote to get in favor of getting rid of what's happened to these fishermen. And I believe Gorsuch will too. Potential far-reaching appeal over another legal effort to have the so-called Chevron deference overturned by the Supreme Court. The 1984 ruling says that when congressional federal laws are not clearly defined, federal agencies should be allowed to broad discretion to interpret and enforce these policies. The case, this is a nutty situation anyway. Lead plaintiff Looper Bright Enterprises of New Jersey, represented by the Case of Action Institute, challenges a federal mandate requiring Atlantic herring fishermen to pay more than $700 per day for monitors to ride their boats, observe their activities, and report to the government. How absurd and unnecessary is that anyway? Oh my God, I make that person's life miserable while they're on my boat. The arguments. A federal appeals court found that the National Marine Fisheries Service's interpretation of the federal fishery law to be reasonable. The fishermen argue Congress never granted the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is true, the authority to force fishermen to pay for monitors. Groups supporting them say the Chevron precedent forces courts to defer to an agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute. Those supporting continued deference say as adverse ruling would sow chaos across the federal government and would concrete rulemaking authority with unelected judges who are not experts in specific policy matters. Ooh, boo-hoo. I'd love to see chaos freak out all the fucking agencies. The impact. Conservatives have long chafed at the Chevron decision. The High Court has been incrementally reining in federal regulators, including in June 2022, decision limiting EPA authority over greenhouse gas emissions. Overturning Chevron for further weakening federal agency discretion would have enormous impacts on key areas like the environment, workplace safety, customer protections, public health, and immigration. The court has the option of broadly addressing the use of Chevron deference or clarifying specific areas of its application by federal agencies. Abortion, I'm going to fuck up this big time. FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. Issue: lawsuit seeking to restrict access to mifepristone, one of the two drugs typically used to induce medical abortion. The FDA case: FDA approved mifepristone in 2000 to end pregnancy, and it is used in combination with the second drug, misoprostol. The pill combination is approved for the use of up to 10 weeks of pregnancy. Arguments: groups opposing the FDA say it failed to follow proper procedures when determining the drug's safety risks. The Biden administration warned an adverse ruling would severely disrupt the way drugs are tested and brought to the market. The Supreme Court has allowed the FDA to regulate the drug while the case is being litigated on its merits. While the case is still being litigated, a nationwide injunction could be issued by the judge, preventing medication abortions even in states where it remains legal. The impact: any high court decision could impact 40 million women nationwide, and the Gut-Masher Institute research group says more than half of all abortions in the U.S. use mifepristone. Whatever. Supreme Court involvement is arguably the most contentious social issue, could have enormous political impacts in a presidential year. Gun rights: Garland versus Cargill. Issue: whether the bump stock device is a machine gun as defined under federal law because it was designated and intended for the use of converting a rifle into a weapon that fires automatically more than one shot by a single trigger function of a trigger, which is false for anyone who ever has used a gun. It's absolutely ridiculous. Bump stock moves it back and forth, and you continually hit the trigger, so it's not a single function of the trigger. Anyway, the case: in the wake of 2017 mass shooting in Las Vegas that left 60 people dead and 500 more wounded, the ATF issued an interpretive rule concluding bump stocks are machine guns. A bump stock is an attachment that allows a semi-automatic rifle to mimic a fully automatic weapon's cycling fire rate to mimic nearly continuous automatic fire, according to the ATF. The device essentially replaces the gun's stock and pistol grip and causes the weapon to buck back and forth, repeatedly bumping the trigger against the shooter's finger. Michael Cargill, owner of Central Texas Gun Works, sued the government after he was forced to surrender several bump stocks under the ATF rule. The arguments: Mark Shenswith, NCLA president and counsel, said, quote, "This is not about a case about gun rights. It's a case about administrative power," end quote. And that is absolutely true. Quote, "Congress never gave ATF the power to rewrite federal criminal statutes pertaining to machine guns, nor could it. Writing federal criminal laws is solely preserved to Congress, and the Trump and Biden administration committed grievous constitutional error by trying to ban the bump stocks without involving Congress. We are confident the U.S. Supreme Court will right this wrong for Michael Cargill and all Americans." End quote. The impact: millions of lawful gun owners who own bump stocks prior to the ATF rule. Cargill's lawyer says the ATF has admitted that the loss of property for law-abiding Americans, should the rule stand, would be upward of 100 million. I think it'd be more than that, but anyway. Free speech: National Rifle Association of America versus VULO. At issue: whether a government regulator threatened regulated entities with adverse regulatory actions if they do business with a controversial speaker, allegedly because of the government's own hostility to the speaker's viewpoint, violates the First Amendment. The case: the former superintendent of New York State Department of Financial Services, DFS, known as Maria Vullo, at the behest of then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, allegedly wielded DFS regulatory power to financially blacklist the NRA, coercing banks and issuers to cut ties with the association in an effort, the group says, to suppress its speech. Arguments: the NRA argues that Vullo's actions were meant to silence the NRA, using, quote, guidance letters, end quote, backroom threats, and other measures to cause financial institutions to, quote, drop the association. The NRA's First Amendment claims withstand multiple motions to dismiss, but in 2022, after Vullo appealed the trial court's ruling, the Second Circuit struck down the NRA's claims. The court decided that in an era, this is so absurd that this was their reasoning, in an era of, quote, enhanced corporate social responsibility, end quote, It was responsible for New York's financial regulators to warn banks and insurance companies against serving pro-gun groups based on the supposed, quote, social backlash, end quote, against the group's advocacy. The impact: the NRA earned an unlikely bedfellow in the American Civil Liberties, who will argue in support of the gun rights group that they ideologically oppose, but agree that the free speech liberties were violated in the New York official. Obstruction. Fisher versus United States. At issue: whether a court of appeals correctly determined the indictments in these three cases permissibly, including a charge of corruptly obstructing, influencing, or impeding an official proceeding based on each petitioner's violent conduct on January 6, 2021. The case: over 300 people have been charged by the Department of Justice with obstructing an official proceeding in connection with the January 6 riot. This case stems from three defendants: Garrett Miller of Dallas, Joseph Fisher of Boston, and Edward Jacob Lang of New York Hudson Valley, who are challenging the charge. The argument: a lower court judge earlier dismissed the obstruction charge against the three defendants, ruling that their conduct did not warrant this charge. However, the Biden DOJ challenged the ruling, and the appeals court in Washington, D.C., of course, agreed with government prosecutors. The impact: the outcome of this case could impact former President Trump's criminal case, in which he also faces similar obstruction charges. It would also impact a ton of people that have that charge, I would assume, and they're being charged for that as well. I don't know why they didn't put that. Anyway, those are the cases, prominent cases, landmark cases, that SCOTUS will hear in 2024. There are other cases, but this article just covered those. And to be honest, the other cases are kind of like random. Anyway, this is Are You Ready For It? Take care, guys. Have a great day.